What's good, everybody? So as you know, recently I kind of reacted to a Woowa versus ZZZ writing video that I don't think was written or planned out the best. It kind of caused a lot of controversy. Comparing plot is very different to comparing writing and story, but we have a video here from Maybe Not Mike, my experience with gacha games, writing versus storytelling, and I'm wondering if we're going to get a bit more of a critical analytical breakdown. This is very clearly someone's own personal opinion. It's not meant to be spoken as though it is kind of fact. It is I'm hoping we can get some productive conversation from this, and we'll see with how much we agree or not. And we're gonna be respectful, okay? Well, we're in respectful arc. We're in the respectful arc. So let's go and have a look at how this plays out.
When some friends convinced me to read the Fate Stay Night visual novel like a month before I started university. And although it took me way too long to actually finish reading through it, it was all I could think about. I would often geek out with friends about the world building, the various systems, the characters, the fights, and amidst all that, Ufotable's anime adaptation of Fate Zero came along to mesmerize and traumatize all of us. It was a great time. And later on, it was
I feel like an idiot. I feel like an idiot for being someone who, like, hasn't seen Fate. I've not seen Fate at all, and I feel like I've missed out on some kind of like cultural moment in like the anime nerdy community. You know, like I really feel like it's like not watching Titanic as a movie, you know? That's kind of what it's equivalent to.
that they were working on an adaptation for Unlimited Blade Works, which had all of us over the moon.
Let's talk about the moon.
Guys, I'm Welsh, okay? The story of Merlin and King Arthur comes from Wales. So, like, or at least there's a lot of it is inspired by it. So, yeah, you know what I mean.
At the moon.
But then something happened. Right before the first episode was scheduled to air, they revealed that they've been working on a new project that would forever change how I viewed video games. Fate Grand Order. Although the 2-minute trailer was fairly bare bones and didn't show any gameplay, Sakamoto Maya's narration coupled with the now iconic main theme had all of us enthralled.
Tides of Annihilation. I'm
and all we knew was that it was a mobile
That's
game.
That's the one with Jennifer English again, right? Am I crazy? I'm pretty sure Jennifer English is in that. Bro, she's in it's like she's the Timothy Chalamet of like video game voice acting. If Timothy Chalamet is in a movie, you probably want to watch it. If Jennifer English is voice acting a character, you're probably gonna want to play it. Like, I'm just being for real.
None of us expected. And right after the first season of the anime had ended, the game launched in Japan. So we had to live vicariously through people uploading videos onto YouTube, which was honestly still kind of exciting. And we would only have to wait 2 years.
Wasn't FGO like huge, like the biggest gacha for a while? Like before Genshin was like the biggest one, like phenomenally massive.
Years until they announced the NA version, which everyone was fully expecting. I still remember that very summer, I immediately got my hands on a brand new iPhone SE, installed the game the moment it was available, and didn't get to play the game because my friends introduced me to the world of re-rolling. So instead, we spent like 2 weeks trying to get our Gilgamesh, Waver, and Tamamo. I did eventually end up with MP2 Gilgamesh and a Tamamo, but I would get Waver for 4 entire years, so that was cool. Anyway, the gameplay was fairly engaging. The amount of viable characters and teams were staggering, and the grind was tedious, but I spent most of my adult life playing MMOs, so I was kind of used to it by then anyway.
Yeah, it's ultimately actually crazy. The amount of crossover between like people who played MMOs then switching to play gachas is actually low-key kind of crazy. There is a huge like overlap of that kind of audience, and if you were an MMO player that comes to play gacha, you are more forgiving to grinds. I do think that you are way more forgiving to grinds and are more likely to be like really more lenient by them. And like, but you're capped, right? It's like you have the MMO thing of wanting to progress your characters and grind for stuff, but you're capped at like how much you can actually do to like quench your grinding habits. Yeah, swap to gacha because of the MMO drought. Yeah, no, 100%. There's like, it's like a crazy, it's like an Aswin Gold, man. Do you think Aswin plays MMOs anymore? Nah, he plays gachas, man. He literally he's a Kurobot.
The key part for me was the story. Now, FGO had the benefit of many prior works having done a lot of the world building already, so it didn't need to do a whole lot to introduce the setting, the systems, all the rules, which allowed them to immediately throw you into familiar territory. Fuyuki City, the setting of Fate Stay Night. Kind of, except not, whatever. My point is that while the storytelling was done in a familiar visual novel style in a familiar setting, the added gameplay did a lot to get me immersed into the game itself. Although it wasn't really until Camelot and Babylonia that I was actually hooked onto the main story, the various events and side content did keep me logging in regularly. And after the climactic ending, the Lost Belts came along, and that shit was a game changer. Literally, the writing quality had improved over the years, sure, but it really suddenly felt like a completely different game. I will admit I've since dropped the game after having finished Lost Belt 6, but man, let me tell you, that shit was peak. To this day, I still think about the scenes with Orion and Artemis in Atlantis, Hirstari in Olympus, and Muramasa in Avalon. Absolute fucking cinema. But the thing is that writing and storytelling are two very different things. Writing is more of a skill, like craft, an ability to communicate ideas and concepts to the reader, while storytelling is more so an art form in the sense that no matter how intriguing your story is, if it's not done in a manner that consistently engages the reader, then the twists and turns either won't have any impact.
So true. Like, this is the biggest difference between writing and storytelling. Writing is about how can you deliver information in a way that makes sense, that makes you compelled to like keep wanting to see what's going on. Like, are you writing, when we say writing, I feel like it's more so about like, who is the character? Are you getting all the information out of them? Are you describing the places, the locations that you're going to? Are you describing what's happening well? Like, writing is more about like just reading words. It's about, are the characters written well? Are you giving enough info about every single area? And the storytelling is about how they tell you that. How do they present that? It could be through words, the way that it's written, the information, the way that you see it visually, and how they both pair up together. So they're not the same thing. Writing is not the same thing as storytelling.
Packed or just never happened because they've already stopped reading it.
Yeah, writing is the road, but writing is also, you have your stops at like gas stations along the way. Like, you're put onto like, the writing tells you where you need to go, right? The writing gives you a map and a compass of the road, and then the journey is the journey of the story.
And in that regard, I do think the storytelling was done relatively well in FGO. But due to the nature of the setting, there's a constant need to introduce different casts of characters from various backgrounds, which then leads to a growing number of opposing perspectives. But there's only so much story they can tell in each section, and then the pacing of the story may suffer, and then the tension just keeps building and takes way too long to resolve. It's all a balancing act that unfortunately is incredibly subjective. No story will truly be able to appeal to everybody, and sometimes as a reader, you're forced to either acknowledge that fact and trudge through the less exciting portions of the story, or weigh your options and figure out if you care enough to continue reading at all. If you've played games like Genshin, Star Rail, or Wuthering Waves, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. There are plenty of exciting moments in each of their stories, all kinds of lore reveals.
I'm gonna say something crazy. Okay? I think one of the biggest differences, I'm gonna compare Honkai Star Rail and Wuthering Waves, for example, right? I think they both do things good, but some of them do things better than the other. For example, the set and setting for Wua, I think, is so much better than Honkai Star Rail. Like, cinematics, animations, like the actual like reactivity of the characters themselves, the things you like visually see, right? I think it's better. I think the story is pretty good in like Wua. However, Honkai Star Rail does have an edge, and that edge comes with like, the characters feel way more important to the overall story. Every time I play a Honkai Star Rail, like, even if you think the story is good or not, they write their characters, I think, with a lot more depth than Wuthering Waves. I do. It's like the characters are integrated from the start and it carries throughout. Wua doesn't really have that, like, as strong of a base of linking all your characters into the main overall story. Like, I think for like like okay, Star, a lot of your cast will follow you throughout like the whole year, you know, and it means things and it has meaning. And you could say, well, there's a reason why the quests are way longer. And if Wuthering Waves quests were the same length as Honkai Star Rail quests, then maybe the same thing would happen too. I think that's a consequence, right? Like HSR is a much, much, much longer story. They're able to tell more and get deep within it more. But WoW usually, like, even at the start of like 2.0, 2.1, like you're playing like 2 to 3 hours like per patch. You don't have as much time to get into like the characters as much. And now we're having these like half patches where like they're getting rid of companion quests and they're just writing them into the story to make them feel like more intrinsic like to everything. So I think it's just kind of interesting. Yeah, like I think it's kind of I do wish WoW was able to integrate the characters into the overall story a bit more better than not just being in like the patch. That's not what I want to see, you know. That's my main criticism of like 2.x.
It's memorable.
We're never seeing any of the Amphoria's characters again in HSR. Right, but like, I mean, while you're playing through the story, characters feel like they matter a bit more.
Cutscenes, but those moments are often short-lived, and sometimes you have to go back and ponder on whether the 5 hours of exploration, exposition, and dialogue.
Unless like you're like Cardathia and Wooer. Cardathia is an exception because she's present basically at every point in like 2. Whatever, right? That's an example.
Was worth those very moments. Which is why pacing is the big one that most people have a problem with. Honkai Star Rail is, in my opinion, one of the biggest offenders in that regard. The world building is incredibly meticulous, yet vast. The setting is still largely full of holes, but still intriguing. The characters are a mixed bag, but in my opinion, a net positive overall. But the pacing of the story is a mess. There is so much unnecessary fluff in the dialogue that it's really hard to maintain interest even during key parts of the story. What should be a tool
like,
to
the information being delivered to you could be important and interesting, but if you don't care, you're gonna have a bench moment, and you don't want people to be bored with interesting information you're trying to deliver to them.
The reader attached to the characters, invested in the story, and immersed into the setting often feels like it's just trying to meet some arbitrary word count requirement without adding anything remotely substantial. When used in moderation, the use of casual interactions between characters is an important tool to convince the reader that bonds are being formed, developed, or tested to humanize the cast. When it's 5, 6, 7 scenes in a row, you can't help but feel like the writers are desperately trying to force you to become emotionally invested in a way that doesn't feel organic, which can then break the illusion and reveal that these are just one-dimensional characters that they're trying to sell you on, figuratively and literally. And while we're here, another issue I've come across is the passage of time in a broad sense. For example, there are some scenes where a lot of things happen and you're shown various groups of characters interacting with each other. But then 2 hours of exploring and reading later, you discover that all of this happened in the span of like 10 minutes. And other times we fight a group of enemies and then we get hit with a black screen with white text telling us that 3 entire days of defending the town have suddenly passed. Huh? When? I didn't do that. Granted, the perception of time is really hard to nail in narrative.
Yeah, I also think perception of time is hard in a gacha game where you're waiting like a month between patches. You're waiting such a long time, like physically, that I feel like we just kind of forget how much in-game time is passing. So I don't really know if this is like a point that really means too much, because I think even the player is going to get confused of like time between them playing the actual game and it releasing and what's actually happening. I have no idea how long it was from where we landed in Renacita to like finishing like Renacita. Like I have no idea.
Experiences like these, as opposed to an action adventure RPG where you're running through fields fighting hordes of enemies to get to your next quest objective, while your party members argue over the morality of a man cheating on multiple women. If you know, you know.
And
another example is the sense of urgency. There are so many moments where characters will just stand there calmly talking to each other for like 10 minutes right in front of a pack of enemies.
Genshin Impact. The end of the first Luna quest, the ending. There's urgency. We have to do this thing, and then you end up walking. Oh my god, that actually almost made me crash out. Listen, I actually quite like the first Lulu quest of Genshin, but that ending actually almost pissed me off. Like, we're supposed to be quick, guys. This is really important and whatever. I also kind of felt that with Wuwa, like with the hunt, I didn't feel as much urgency with the hunt as we were supposed to feel. Like, I feel like it was supposed to be this big thing, but it didn't really feel like it either. I'm like, okay.
Distinctly staring at them in the middle of a world-ending crisis that they're supposedly tasked with stopping. Not exactly the right time to reminisce about that one time your professor embarrassed a classmate in front of your peers. And that's what I mean by writing versus storytelling. Some of these interactions can be important for character and lore development, but TPO is everything, and dropping the wrong lines at the wrong moments can so easily break the reader's suspension of disbelief and really pull them out of the story.
I don't know if this really matters that much. I don't know anyone who really cares about the amount of time that's taken place and it makes it less immersive for them. I understand what he's saying. I just don't know if it's a real thing people care about.
Well, this is such a shame because I did really enjoy the setting and story of Amphorius, but due to the terrible pacing, I could never get as fully invested as I wished I could until the very end,
valid,
which by at that point, it was almost too late.
No, but if we're talking about actual pacing because there's too much exposition, I agree. That could definitely take you out of it. But I think it's less of a time perception thing and more like information overload. I think that's the difference. Like, you don't have time to like process what you've learned and then do something cool with that information, right? You learn new information, something cool happens with the information you've learned, story ensues, moves on. But HSR is like exposition, you know? So that way I agree.
Wuthering Waves had quite a few problems with this in Huanglong. The writing was half decent, but it spent most of its time teaching about the setting and not nearly enough time with character development. We started with so many questions, and instead of looking for answers to them, we were just given a different set of questions that took precedence due to an alleged impending disaster. This was largely improved in Black Shores and was actually flipped entirely in Renacida, where it focused heavily on its characters while only giving you snippets of the overarching plot. Not exactly what I had in mind, but the main plot itself wasn't overly complicated, so I think it was the correct move as far as story goes. That said, the lore reveals involving the rover and their past self were genuinely more interesting, and the rest of
I agree. Anytime we get information about Rover, it's the best part of the game. For me.
See, that did kind of just feel like a side quest to me. But fortunately, or unfortunately, I was already...
I don't understand that. Renacida just felt like a side quest? Then what was the main quest? Huh.
Invested in a lot of the characters, so I didn't mind it as much. Though as a side note, I think the climax of the final chapter was a little too campy for my tastes. And
I think it was very obvious. Do you know what's crazy? When 2.7 happened, it was supposed to be this finale of Wuwa. Again, I don't mean to shit on Wuwa. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to be like objective. Like, obviously it was very emotional and I cried because like it's the ending of like a whole year. Right? It's the ending of a whole year. It's culminated and it's whatever. But if you actually go back without the it's ending like bias and look at it like and see it like objectively, it's like it wasn't the best ending. And the way that I could prove that is because people didn't really talk about it that much. Am I crazy? Like, people didn't really discuss 2.7 to any like extensive length. Like, yeah, it felt like the end of Wuwa, but we had more discussion around 2.5 or 2.8 than we did around 2.7. Like, okay, it's kind of over. Like, it was just kind of like interesting. 2.7 was a huge fumble. The crisis came way too fast out of nowhere. It was solved way too fast. Again, I might get, this might be a hot controversial point. I think Galbrenna felt like she was there simply to like progress the plot. Like, oh, here's the thing that's happening and I have the solution for you immediately. And I didn't like that. Something about that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Like, here I am to kind of help you. I could immediately solve the problem of the issue that you're having. It kind of felt like it did come out of nowhere a little bit. There were some parts of it that are great, right? But it's like, I don't know. There's something about it that just like it didn't hit the way I thought it would. But yeah, it was a bit too cheesy, but still like yeah, it was still good. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't bad. I'm not gonna sit here and say it was bad. I don't think it was bad. The way it was presented was fun. All the stuff with God Brennan was like fun. Don't get me wrong, like at all. I just think for an ending of the finale, it was just kind of, it was a bit lackluster, but like it wasn't bad. It was like good. It was fine. I cried because it was all emotional, but like, yeah. And I didn't like the Threnodian just being like fleur de lis, but evil. You know, like I think that kind of made me feel a certain way too, but it's whatever.
Pre-rendered cutscenes definitely broke my immersion quite a bit, but the final cinematic was hype as fuck, so I'll forgive it. All of that said, I'm gonna come clean. I don't think any of these games even hold a candle to the combined writing and storytelling of games like Arknights, Punishing Grey Raven, and even Zenless Zone Zero. Each of these games blended everything together in a way that a lot of other games failed to do. In Arknights, each of the main acts are broken up into several episodes, and a lot of the earlier ones are definitely full of wordy exposition, but to me, it felt like it always pulled me back into the setting at the right moments, just in time for each climax to come crashing in. One downside, however, if you could call it that, is that the world of Arknights is immense, and you'll probably want to sift through
There's a lot of Arknights lore, isn't there? From one thing I've learned, there is a lot of fucking Arknights lore.
To get the full picture. Otherwise, you'll likely be missing key details regarding certain characters and factions, especially the intermessi chapters. Thankfully, there is an entire timeline, as well as resources to help you figure out what to read and when, but it is kind of a lot. On top of all that, it can feel like there are way too many characters to keep track of, and it's really easy to get lost in the setting if you're not taking notes. Usually it's not a problem since each region's stories are largely self-contained, but when they interact with the Rhodes Island during certain story sections, it can be difficult to keep track of when this is all happening, who's an ally, who's a bad guy, have you even met these people yet? Again, it is kind of a lot, but they largely do a good job of filling in the missing details if it's relevant to the story. As for PGR, they release full chapters with each update that tell a complete story while mainly focusing on one character or faction, so it can be a mixed bag depending on how quickly you can sympathize with the characters involved. But since the chapters are largely self-contained, you get a full package experience that doesn't suffer from making you wait several updates for the story to resolve. The pace of each chapter moves quickly, but have enough substance to get you acquainted and comfortable with the characters. The passage of time also feels somewhat natural going from chapter to chapter, especially since you'll often see familiar faces as the stories progress. Additionally, the devs have also rolled out an update that basically summarizes the early chapters of the game, so you can effectively skip them and dive right into the good stuff, so that's cool. I did personally enjoy reading through them just to learn about the setting. It's kind of ironic though.
Hey, these stories are kind of mid. Here's a summary skip, and we're encouraging you to do that. It's kind of funny, but we could say that for like a bunch of other stuff too. But it's just kind of interesting.
But you can really tell they're from much older versions of the game, so take that into consideration. And finally, we can move on to Zenless Zone Zero. Now, I don't think Zenless's writing is...
Pack it up, boys. ZZZ time. Quit video. Dislike bomb.
Particularly extraordinary, but the way it does its storytelling is almost perfect in my opinion. One key part is that the main characters, Wise and Bell, are their own characters. They each have their own quirks and personalities, and they're both present in the story at all times, which I think that's a better job of drawing you into the setting than a silent self-insert character like many other games utilize.
I do like
Next,
that they
the
need
usage
each other.
of free roam.
Like, I think that is really cool. It's not just choose your character, it's they work together. I do love that. I think it's great.
Visual novel and comic book styles also keeps things fresh and engaging, and despite the growing number of factions, the entire cast of characters really feel like they're a part of a moving, lived-in world, especially with how often they make cameo appearances when suitable. And lastly, the dialogue, casting, and voice direction in this game are amazing. Thanks in part due to its more modern urban setting, most of the characters are going to feel more familiar and relatable, although sometimes they do go a little overboard with pop culture references and trendy lingo. I personally find it mostly endearing, with a few exceptions.
Skibbity Riz 67?
And naturally, it's hard to compare the
Skibbity Riz 67
games like Arknights, PGR, and FGO to one using 3D models like Genshin and Wuthering Waves. For the former,
I do want to give Zenless a shot, but the fact that everyone says that 2.x story is bad makes me so unwilling to want to play. I kind of just want to play for the combat. Like, I'll be real. Like, I still haven't even gotten to 2.x. ZZZ has so much good points. It goes pretty dark as well, but they don't keep the tone. I feel like it's having a bit of an identity crisis of like what it wants to be. Does it want to be silly goofy game, or does it want to be kind of like serious dark game? Like, what does it this alternative game, like what does it want to be? I don't even know if the devs know at this point.
Will naturally be much higher since they have to describe the scenes as they happen, but when the exposition goes on for too long, they can easily bring the reader out of the very scene they're painting. While for the latter, it can kind of be challenging to convince the reader that these 3D models are in fact interacting with each other and not just doing default poses in front of each other. Which is why I think Zenless does it best by utilizing a combination of methods, especially since even their visual novel sections utilize very expressive 3D models anyway. As a side note, it also frustrates me when dialogue gets cut off in free roam sections just because you walk into the next zone.
Oh, I hate that. Games, Woo is so bad for that. Woo was so fucking bad for that. Stop it.
Peeve than anything, but it'd be nice if they made it clearer when a cutscene is about to trigger. I will say I've also heard great things about games like Girls Frontline, Olympus Company, and Counterside. Admittedly, I haven't gotten around to playing them, and I don't know if I ever will, especially with Enfield right around the corner. But maybe one day when I'm caught up on everything. Anyway, if you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching and listening. This more or less serves as a pilot episode and resume for Gacha game content, and I'd love to hear about your experiences and opinions about the ones you've played. This was also all to set up a series where I'll be rating all the Gacha games I've played this far to find out which ones are still worth playing and which ones I should probably drop from my rotation in favor of other ones. But until then, take it easy out there. Hope to see you soon. Cheers.
This was honestly, I enjoyed this video too, bro. We've had 2 back-to-back really good videos. Maybe not Mike. I'm loving all these new people coming into the gadget space and making videos like this. I think it's so cool. I think it's a W. Like, this was nice. Yeah, pretty goddamn decent. Guys, I'm gonna link it to you in the chat. Y'all could do with that as you wish, you know, W video. Yeah, I agree with a lot of points. I think some were like, I can understand, but maybe not so much. But this was a well done. This is how to do a comparison. The way you do a comparison is just talk about them like individually, because I don't think you can compare them. I think when you compare them like directly, it's always going to be in like bad faith with bias. Doing it like this, where you just talk about them individually, is the way to go when it comes to like storytelling. And I think this is the way it should be done, not like the other video that we saw. That was being like, yeah, Woo is terrible because ZZZ did this thing better. It's like, okay, like what are we doing? Anyway, guys, I appreciate y'all. I'm live every single day, almost on Twitch and Kick in the afternoon. I appreciate y'all. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
Twitch.tv/Captain Cabinetz, Captain Cabinetz.